Hi, my name is Cass and welcome to my channel. In 2024, I was able to read 163 books. 104 of them were fantasy, 47 of them were sci-fi, and then a mix in there was also a bunch of literary fiction. When I started 2024 reading, if you would have told me that I was going to become this epic fantasy reader and lover, I wouldn't have believed you, because I didn't really read that genre. I occasionally picked up a book, but it was never my thing. I mainly focused on, especially around this time last year, literary fiction. I'm really excited though to go through my top 10 favorite books with you, just because I'm able to see the progress and progression of me as a reader just throughout the year based on what I loved when I read it and now what I'm reading currently in 2025. A few of these also were able to change me as a reader, and they are kind of altering the way that I am looking for books, how I want to read books, and I just cannot wait to go through them. Number 10, The Women by Kristen Hanna. The Women follows Frankie McGrath, who was born into a very wealthy, conservative Southern California home with a family full of war heroes, and she decides to follow in her brother's footsteps after he's graduated from the Naval Academy and shipped off to the Vietnam War. She was in nursing school and she decided that she was going to take matters into her own hand and she was going to become a hero as well. When you take and look at this book, you realize that it's more than just the men that were there. It is also these women, these nurses who were taking care of these fallen soldiers and trying to get them patched up so they could be shipped home alive. You are going to be watching the trauma that unfolds in Frankie's life as she is now taking care of these broken men who are fighting on the front lines, and she just has to try and fix them up and just help them as best as she can in such a terrible situation. It is watching her struggle through young adulthood as a woman in her 20s, but also she's now having to deal with PTSD. She's trying to find love in a very difficult situation, and Kristen Hanna just writes it so perfectly. But I can say that this evoked a lot more emotions from me, and it shone a spotlight on people who are so often overlooked and finally gave them the recognition that they deserved. She is able to put such emotions into words that no matter who is reading, no matter what your background, you are going to feel what these characters are going through as like it's you that are experiencing this trauma and this pain. I didn't expect it to end up falling into my top 10 when it first arrived on my doorstep, but now I think about it a lot more frequently than I ever would have thought. This story begins in 1914, but instead of starting on the front of World War I, we begin in an English boarding school, and you meet your two main characters, Elwood and Gaunt. Elwood is this perfect, charming, ideal boy, and Gaunt is his best friend who feels just awkward, and he's in love with his best friend, and this isn't a time when you can't be in love with other men because it's frowned upon, it's shamed, it's considered a disease. And to escape these feelings, Gaunt decides that he's going to enlist and go to the front, and Elwood ends up deciding he's going to follow as well. Throughout these pages, even though it is on the shorter side, you are able to watch these boys be forced to turning into men because they are witnessing death at their doorstep. And it's not just death of random people, it is death of their friends that they had just graduated school with. They are reading the papers, they are realizing that they are now men whether they want to be or not. And it's just so heartbreaking to watch this happen. It is this epic love story, and it is just focusing on the brutal reality of war and the fact that so many young men lost their lives and they lost their childhood to this war, being forced to grow up because if they didn't go to war, then they were in the wrong, even though being in the war meant that they lost and they were going to lose absolutely everything. I was utterly consumed by this story, from the romance to the setting to the writing. I just could not help but love every single facet in it. Number 8, The Empire of Gold. This book is the final book in the Daevabad trilogy by S.A. Chakraborty, and when I say that this series is now in my top 10 favorite series of all time, it really is because it is really just that incredible. I loved the way that S.A. Chakraborty was able to conclude this series, because you had so many different perspectives, timelines, character arcs that are just all over the place, but she was able to just compile it into one perfect little box, and she was able to wrap a bow on top and just make everyone happy, even though there was really no way for you to be happy in the end, for the way that this conclusion needed to go. I think following along these characters, Nahari, Ali, Dara, just seeing where they started to where they ended was immaculate growth, change, and you can feel it in the way that their dialogue changed, but also their mannerisms, especially Nahari. The fact that Nahari started out as a street orphan who had to steal and was presumed to be a witch because of the fact that she was able to cure so many people, just to where she ended. It's absolutely incredible. I also really loved the way Ali's character shifted, just because it forced him into being this prince who thought he could get away with everything, into looking at the reality of a situation and realize that there's more to absolutely everything than just having all the possibilities just at your hand, and he had to come to grips with the reality of consequences. And then you have Dara, my sweet, sweet Dara, who is one of the best, most beautiful characters that have ever existed, because he was so misunderstood and he just wanted good for absolutely everyone. And it was just so heartbreaking to watch him strive to see the good in absolutely everybody, and then to watch it just break their heart. And I loved him so much. I also really loved in this series and this book specifically the fact that you can believe the love triangle between Ali, Nahari, and Dara. It is one of the most believable love triangles I have ever witnessed, and probably one of the only ones I will ever actually believe exist. I loved this conclusion. I loved this series so much, and I really think that she did such a great job being able to tie up all of the loose ends and give us an ending that was worthy of this story. Number 7, Blood Over Brighthaven. This book was absolutely incredible. Emma Wong starts out this book just giving you everything you need, everything you want, puts you in a chokehold just truly right from the beginning, because that first chapter sets you up for so much success, sets up the book for so much success, and also leaves you just wanting more, but having not a lickety-split of clue what is happening. I think that this magic system is one of the most incredible magic systems in the entire world, and it took me a while to fully understand what actually it was. And when you get to that one specific part, because I'm not going to spoil the most important part of this entire book, that reveal, I had to put my book down. I was so frustrated at our main characters, just everything about it just really ticked me off, but it was so important to the plot. Just witnessing the fact that these characters now had to come to terms with the reality of this situation. Siona and Tamil are also probably one of the most perfect representations of a couple that you wish could exist, just will never have the ability to. I think you can feel the yearning between the two of them, and you can feel the chemistry between these characters, the sparks that are there, but it will just never be able to catch flame. But I also respected the fact that even though she created this wonderful, beautiful, powerful female main character through Siona, I also think it's important that she was able to keep her flaws, and her flaws were also such a vital and important aspect to this book. Emma Wong has the ability to write about difficult topics that not many other authors are able to properly do. This book covers war, genocide, colonialism, religious dogma, and she does it in such a proficient way that you are able to realize the message that she is saying before it has even been said. And I think that Siona's character does that very well. She is very heavy when it comes to the religious dogma and the fact that she thinks Tamil and his people are in the wrong. I just think that she was able to then overcome those challenges very well, and it doesn't feel like we're just thrusting our character into the good and anything. It is done, and you can see the progress and the change and the mindset, but it sucks how she had to get there. But it's the way that it was properly done and needed for her character. I really like and I really hate the way that every single book that Emma Long writes is left open-ended, but I also like the fact that I'm able to interpret the good, or I'm able to interpret the bad, and I'm able to create an ending that I want for these characters. And I just loved being able to see the growth in Tomo, the growth in Siona, and just the growth in this world in general. Number 6, Harrow the Ninth. I'm going to put it out there quite plainly. I was not the biggest fan of Gideon the Ninth. I did not understand the hype behind it. I thought that it was very well executed. It was a very different type of book. You had basically a Hunger Games with so much politics, nobody could even keep it straight. But I really just didn't feel any connection with any characters. But when it came to Harrow the Ninth, to start off with, I was very confused. I did not think that I read the right book, and I had to go back through and look and make sure that I really did read Gideon the Ninth, because when you start off this book, I don't think anybody quite realized they were reading the same series because it feels so different. But I think by the 25% mark, I realized just how vital this book was to these characters, to this world, but also even to me as a reader. I loved the way that we are finally able to see these characters, because you are getting first, second, and third person narratives all within these pages. And it's very difficult to keep track of at certain aspects, because there are sometimes you are jumping paragraphs between first, second, and third, and it's difficult to keep it straight because you don't know who is who, what is what. Tamsin Muir wrote a mystery. It's a mystery about lesbian necromancers in space, but it's a mystery also to understand what you are even reading. But that's what made it so much more fun. You had all of these layers that you had to pick through individually, and you were then able to finally take a step back and actually look at the story from above and realize how brilliant it actually is. There's murder, there's magic, there are characters that you feel like you should hate, but for some reason you don't. You are meeting one of the funniest side characters, John, who also, why is his name John? Just every single thing about this book is just beautiful. I really fell in love with all these characters. I also fell in love with the story and the writing. It was just perfect. And I keep saying it was perfect, but it really just was. In number 5, Young Mungo by Douglas Stewart. I'm pretty sure if I think too hard about this book, I will end up crying again because it just hurt me beyond belief in ways I was not expecting. It follows along Mungo, who lives in a housing project in Glasgow, and he is a Protestant. His brother Hamish is in charge of a gang there, and he ends up befriending another boy named James, who's a Catholic, and it ends up turning into this forbidden gay Romeo and Juliet between the Protestants and the Catholics. And it's just truly heartbreaking, not only knowing that these boys just want to love each other and they can't, but it's also heartbreaking just knowing how little anybody actually cares for Mungo. Mungo and James slowly become friends in a time when they're meant to become sworn enemies, and gradually they end up falling in love, and they are seeing a future of what they could have together, where they could be in a place where they belong. But Mungo's older brother, Hamish, ends up finding out about this forbidden love and ends up just ensuing a world of brutality on James and threatens him and tells him that they can never be together and that Mungo has to leave him alone in the dust. But a few months later, Mungo's mom ends up sending him on an adventure with 2 strange men to a loch in western Scotland. And when I say I was sobbing by the 40% mark in this book, I was. This book hurt me in ways that I didn't think was possible, and I think it was such a powerful, powerful book that I think many people should pick up and should read eventually. Number 4, Jade Legacy by Fontaine. This book was the best conclusion to a series I have ever read. I have never read a more perfect conclusion ever, and I will lay that down now. Jade Legacy was what made this series 6 stars. The Greenbone Saga is now in my top 10 favorite series of all time because of the impact that Jade Legacy had. You are able to see the Call family truly grow in this book because it spans generations. You are watching not only just the Call family themselves grow up, but you are also watching their children grow up. I loved the fact that you are never able to tell who was truly good and who was truly evil in this book because it was so real, raw, and visceral. You are witnessing such an impact on these characters and on their lives, and you are seeing how things that could happen generations ago are going to impact young people to that day. Fonda Lee is just a masterful writer, and she does not get enough credit where credit is due because she creates such a powerful character and powerful story. And I just fell in love with every single aspect of the Greenbone saga, every single thing because of Jade Legacy. When you think about how much Hilo, Andon, and Wen have changed over the course of these 3 books, you are going to see that put into play in Jade Legacy. I really loved the magic system that takes place in Kikon. I loved the aspect of the Jade and how the more you wore, the more powerful you became, but it wasn't just a free-for-all. And I also really liked the fact that it was just a Godfather-esque martial arts book with some magic imbued into the world. And you also had such a different political aspect to it as well. You are seeing the gang side, and from the Weatherman's office, you are watching the importance behind the scenes that I don't feel like many books you ever get the chance to see. You are seeing the politics and the step-by-step plays in them, and especially in Jade Legacy, like, you are getting to truly get the depth of what goes on in the Weatherman's office, but also the politics of this series in general. Everything about this world and these characters just fits so well and comes into a perfect play when it comes to Jade Legacy. I could not ask for a more perfect ending to a book, and if this series is just sitting there and you thought it was okay, I promise you Jade Legacy makes up for it. Number 3, Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. This book stands alone when it comes to sci-fi books because it's unlike any other sci-fi book I've ever read, and I fell in love with the premise and the mystery a lot quicker than I expected myself to, and also for the fact that it is so heavily focused in the science narrative, and you are able to understand just says so much about Andy Weir as a writer, because I'm not fluent in science by any means. And I was able to fully grasp and understand every single meaning word that he was saying because he said it in such layman's terms while still using the scientific knowledge and terms. I just loved it. I absolutely did. But I also really loved the fact that I listened to this on audiobook, and this production was immaculate. You were able to enjoy the mystery so much more, but you were also able to enjoy every single thing about it because it was just incredible. I loved the narrator and the way that you were able to feel like you were taking place in this book with these characters. It is this mystery where Rylan wakes up and he doesn't know who he is, where he is, but he is the lone survivor in this mission to save planet Earth. And he wakes up with no idea of that. And the clock is ticking. The countdown is on. He is slowly gaining and trying to figure out who he is as we are jumping from past to present. And you are gradually be able to put the pieces together as he does as well. And you are learning so much and so little all at the same time. I also really liked the emphasis on friendship in this, and even though you were able to do this on your own, the fact that friendship is such a valuable aspect as for us as humans, but also for others in this world as well, just how important friendship is, I really liked the emphasis on that. I never expected to fall in love with space fighters. If you would have told me that, wouldn't have guessed it. But now, jazz hands, crying. Also, space fighters, crying. I loved Rylan and I loved Rocky. I loved the bonds that they created, the friendship, and just how important it was to have somebody else in the moment when the destruction of both of their planets is just on the line. It was so amazing to be able to watch their friendship grow and the fact that they built a trust on each other, and this book was just amaze. Number 2, The Will of the Many by James Islington. This book has easily catapulted into one of my top 10 favorite books of all time, and that's some pretty stringent competition. There are some pretty phenomenal books up there, but this book easily fits in right with the greats. I loved how fast-paced this book is. You are thrust into an incredible fast-paced narrative mixed with dark academia. The society is similar to that of ancient Rome when it comes to the hierarchy. It was just so incredibly well done right off the bat. The political intrigue is definitely a bit more on the complicated side, but the thing that I really just congratulate James Islington on is the fact that he was able to create such a complex political narrative, but he does it in such a great way that you are never felt like you get info dumped upon. Your main protagonist, Viz, in this was also so incredibly complex and beautiful that I just couldn't help but fall in love with him. I really liked how his complex background and tumultuous upbringing really just was embodied, and it made him into who he was. He was not very trusting, he was very hesitant to make friends, but that also made for such a vital aspect of who he was and how the plot played out that I couldn't help but just enjoy that aspect of him. You were also able to empathize and truly feel every single emotion that he was feeling. And being a fantasy novel, I feel like first-person narratives are always difficult to properly come by and be able to do, just because you are missing out on so much other aspects of the world if you are only hearing from a first-person narrative. But I think that James Islington did it so well that I never felt that way at all. I was never concerned or confused that I was missing out on other aspects. If I'm talking about this book, I can't help but talk about the ending, because when I say I have never been so, I don't even know the proper word for it, just confused, baffled, I was shocked. I simply was shocked by the ending, and I have never been bamboozled so easily. I loved it. I loved the ending. That twist was so incredible. I didn't see it from miles away. It threw me for a loop, and it left such an amazing cliffhanger. Like, I'm hanging on by my fingertips. I cannot wait to see what happens in The Strength of the Few, and I need a release date because I need it. I need this next book now. Number 1 is Morningstar by Pierce Brown. I would love to just put the entirety of the Red Rising saga as my number 1 because I thoroughly loved it so much. But if I have to pick one book that truly impacted me the most, not only this year out of every single book, but also just out of the books in the Red Rising saga, it's going to be Morningstar. This was the perfect end to the original trilogy. The build-up that you had, the climaxes that it gave you, it was just so well fleshed out, so properly done, and it was also so incredibly heartbreaking, and it was beautiful. I think that this book finally gives you the chance to see all these other characters. You are getting to finally realize not only who Darrow is, but you are understanding Several, you are understanding Mustang, you are understanding every single side character because they finally get a piece of the narrative. In this book, you can feel that Darrow just wanted peace. He did not want the war that was thrust upon him. And I just loved how you lost so much and you also lost so many because Pierce Brown wasn't conservative when it came to these people's storylines. He gave them what they deserved, whether they deserved it or not. And while yes, I was so sad to see so much happen to so many different characters, it was so vital to this plot and to this story that I wouldn't have had it any other way. When it comes to Pierce Brown, he does a great job at writing war and battle scenes because it's difficult to keep track of it. And I listened to half of this on the graphic audio, which was incredible and you should listen to it. But the fact that I was able to keep track of everything in my mind, not just needing the pages, says a lot about a writer because there's so many different actions that are occurring and so many different paths that things can take, and you are able to focus and hone in on it while also knowing that there's so much more occurring behind you. I think that Pierce Brown is a phenomenal writer, and the Red Rising saga is one of the best sci-fi series out there. It is literally my favorite series of all time now, and I cannot get enough of the story, of this narrative, of these characters, of this world. Altogether, these are my top 10 books of 2024. You have a various amount of different genres in there, but I also feel like this truly represents me as a reader, what I like to read, and also what I look for in other books. I'm still trying to get this YouTube thing under my belt, so if there's anything I could be doing different that you guys would prefer, please let me know in the comments. I would love to be able to change and adapt to you guys to give you what you guys deserve and what you're looking for. I'm going to be posting videos every single week, one, maybe two, just depending on how much free time I have as well. But I will see you guys next week. Thank you so much for watching.